back, ladies and gentlemen. After that enriching talk on the concept of actions, we move on to the next session. I would, as usual, like to remind you of the common courtesies. Please turn your mobile phones into silent mode. I hope you all enjoyed the Aurobindo and the coffee and are not drowsing away. But before that, we move on to our next speaker, who will be speaking on yoga, life, death and beyond, Dr. Alok Pandey. For this session, I would like to invite Dr. V.P. Nair to moderate and chair it. Dr. V.P. Nair is a consultant cardiologist at Nair Cardiac and Medical Center, Mount Elizabeth Hospital, Singapore. He graduated in medicine with MBBS in 1966 and subsequently worked in Singapore General Hospital. He has obtained his medical degrees from prestigious colleges and universities in the UK and the US. He is a fellow of the Academy of Medicine Singapore and is placed in the Specialty Registry of Cardiology. He is highly trained in the interventional cardiology and angioplasty. He has participated in many angioplasty live demonstration courses here in Singapore, Australia, India, UK, France, and the US. He has published many scientific papers and has addressed many international meetings, including the World Congress of Cardiology. He is also a member of the Singapore Indian Education Trust and heads the Global Organization for People of Indian Origin, GOPIO, here in Singapore. Dr. Nair actively participates in the running of the Hindu Center and is also a member of the organizing committee for the International Gita Forum 2007. Dr. V.P. Nair, may I kindly request you to give us your opening remarks and then chair and moderate this session. Thank you.
Bye there now. Pedagogically, Nandakale, Vanakam, Swagatam. Thank you very much for that kind words. Today we are going to hear about yoga, life, death and beyond in Gita's light. We already went through all the chapters of Gita just now. As life progressed through millions of years, the interaction of body, mind and intellect became an integral part of modern man. With advances in technology, the necessity for further integration of human values has become more relevant today. According to the World Health Organization, health is a state of complete physical and mental well-being and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. But look at the Vedantic principle. They knew it long ago. According to Veda, health is a state of complete physical, mental and spiritual well-being. In other words, the Vedas know that apart from whatever the WHO says, there is a spiritual well-being also added to the health. To achieve and maintain people's health, one needs both physical and mental homeostasis. Yoga is an excellent way to achieve and sustain both these principles. The art of meditation and yoga are known to mankind and practiced by the Hindus for more than probably 8,000 years ago. Today, many professionals are also open to the concept of yoga. Apart from the physical benefits of exercise and mental benefits of meditation, yoga can make one look better, feel better, sleep better, live better, and healthy and shapely individuals. Application of yoga is utilized in modern medicine as an adjunctive therapy in bronchial asthma, certain heart problems, orthopedic problems such as joint pains, etc. Regular exercise, including yoga, helps to increase in the caloric expenditure, just now we ate a lot, that will be expenditure, and can lead to long-term benefits of weight control and thus prevention of hypertension and coronary artery disease. Different forms of yoga are described in the Holy Gita and Vedic literature. The practice of yoga will prevail as one of the best means of physical and mental health. That is just an introduction. Now about the speaker. Dr. Alok Pandey is a well-known psychiatrist, qualified from the prestigious Armed Forces Medical College in Pune, India. He is at the same time a philosopher, I understand, a poet, and a practitioner of Sir Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. He served for 21 years in the Indian Air Force. I'm sure he knows how to control the bombs. As a medical doctor, so he didn't put the Hiroshima bomb as he described earlier on, including the post of professor in the well-known Institute of Space and Aviation Medicine at Bangalore, where he started the department dedicated to yoga research. He has published many papers in national and international journals. He has held several workshops in India and abroad on the themes of Aurobindo's yoga, the yoga of Gita, psychology, integral psychotherapy, stress management, health, and of course spirituality. He is the co-author of a quarterly magazine, New Approaches to Medicine and Health. I present to you Dr. Alok Pandey to talk on yoga, life, death, and beyond.
Friends, every time I hear an introduction of sort, I learn a few things about myself. There is a very nice little story when someone went to Tagore and asked him to write a few words as autograph. So before he went to Tagore, before you go to Shiva, you have the Nandi. This is the tradition. And it carries on right up to, the priest, the most difficult and dangerous breed, if I may say so. Poor God, he is so close to us, he suddenly intercedes and makes it so much more difficult. So anyways, the tradition continued and he went to Raja Subodh Malik, an intellectual, erudite scholar, asked him to write a few words. Subodh Malik, who was the personal secretary to Tagore at that time, writes, forget thyself, know thyself, forget thyself, forget thyself. And when he goes to Tagore, he reverses it and says, know thyself. This is a very short little anecdote. We are talking about Hiroshima bomb and it's a very relevant question, the monks on the streets and things like that, which is the everyday event of the world. We all know, some of us may know or may not know, that during the Second World War, Sri had put all his force behind the Aries. One who wrote essays on the Gita was apparently in seclusion for so many years, yet he had put all his spiritual force behind the Aries. And Winston Churchill, who played a kind of, Arjuna of sort, when he was asked by someone, are you sure that God is on your side? He remarked with amazing clarity, I don't know whether he had read the Gita or not, but something spoke from inside. The Gita is within us. It reveals as we turn to Krishna, the Lord and friend of all mankind. So he says, it doesn't concern me whether God is on our side or not. What is more important is whether I am on the side of God. This is a small little inversion. It's very amazing. Does God take sides? Well, in the Gita, he seems to take sides, even though he is the one who is untouched. On both sides, there is none else but he. Even that is revealed at the end of the Gita. Yet, in this world play, in this clash of forces, in this battlefield of life, you have to take a stand. And these stands can be several, as we see as the Gita unfolds. This is the uniqueness of Gita. It's a strange circumstance in which Gita is born. The circumstance is a battlefield, a gory action. Who has staged the play outwardly? It seems death has staged the play. It would be if death had a party, it would say, here it is my day. Thousands and thousands of innocent men are going to die. Let's have a feast. If death had a play to stage with life as the actors, that's what the stage of Kurukshetra is. And we find in the midst of all this action, Sri Krishna, the supreme representative of the beyond, in the midst of this holy action. We hear about God in the temples. We hear about God in, everybody has a puja room. Sometimes we hear about God in, business parlors. Nowadays God has slightly stepped out. He's not that shy. He comes out a little bit. He has entered into the executive board meetings, and I don't know whether he likes to be there or not, but people believe that he'll bring success and all this. Sometimes God hangs on the door as a kind of, let prosperity comes. But here God is right in the middle of an action which mortal nerves recoil. I don't know whether anyone here has an experience of battle or not. I know about what battle is. It's not at all. My friend Prakash Sharma, who has been a commando in the Indian Army, it's not at all the way we conceive. It's something very real, very concrete, very hard, very gross, if one may say so. At the very beginning, Gita brings this to focus. Even in the most grossest of gross, even in the crudest of crude, even in the hardest of hard, there is the presence of the divine. And it starts rolling its ball from there. He is there. That is the assurance and hope for man. Often people ask this question, and I think it was echoed in so many ways before the meeting started. There was some discussion on how to make Gita more relevant and how to make it more contemporary, and the loss of values and loss of traditions, etc., etc. I'm sure a question like that must have been raised in different times, in different epochs. And we have something very interesting in the Gita. The Lord is there, and as He reveals a deeper and deeper knowledge, at one point Arjuna asks, "Who are you?" Initially he must have thought, I'm sure, when he was speaking of the second chapter, that he is after all a master statesman, a great politician, saying, "Go, do your duty and don't bother about anything else." That can be the word of ethics, or maybe, a social or a political thought. But as he unfolds his own being, as he tells that I have been forever here, come from life to life, I give this yoga, hold the people together. Slowly and slowly Arjuna is moved to its very depths and asks him, "Who are you?" And then he reveals himself, granting the divine vision. And what a revelation. What is God doing on the battlefield? This is the question. In other words, if Arjuna were to ask question in modern mind terms, he would say, "Hey, what are you doing on the battlefield? Have you come here to, like on the side of the Red Cross, trying to save those who are going to be injured?" That's what we associate God with. God is the great helper, giver, savior. What does he say? Kalos mi bhava. I am time the destroyer. My God, God has come as destroyer. And what are you doing here? Arjuna, maybe somewhere there is a doubt that he is time the destroyer, but maybe because he is the destroyer, he knows how to save and he is going to save. But he makes it very clear, doubly clear. Loka kshay krat pravradho. I have come to destroy all these people and beings. This can shake the mortal nerves. But who can see the integral vision, who has not the courage to face death? Who can see the integral Godhead, who cannot stand face to face with the gallows, with the sword, with bullets whizzing by, and say, in all submission, "Thou too art Kali." This is the greatness of Hindu thought. It has not cut God into two parts. There is a world which belongs to God, and there is a part which belongs to our human follies, weaknesses, all that is okay. There is something which God has, something which is Satan's, something which is divine, something which is devilish. Ultimately, the whole responsibility he takes says, "Yes, I am time the destroyer." She who is Durga, the beneficent, wears the face of Kali when she tramples upon the demon roads. It's perfectly fine. God is the destroyer. And that is the beauty of the Gita, that it immediately, at the very beginning, Gita is such an integral work. It brings life and death in a single unity. He is the eternal life giver, as he reveals himself. Even in the vision of the integral Godhead, we see on one side Divya Mal, Divya Sugandh, Divya Pushpam, everything. On the other side, we see him many-armed, weapons in hand, swallowing not only Bharta but also Sangharta. This is the vision of the divine. Life and death run together and both conspire towards a single goal. The very first lesson, the very start of the Gita is they are not opposites. They conspire towards a single goal. This is a lesson I am sure many people understand now. Mark Twain remarked very interestingly that if there was no death, there would be no more place for people to live. I mean, this was the most simplistic statement, but so very true. We also know that death is necessary for life. Human beings have two kinds of death, cellular death. That which is a natural process. We die several times physically, so to say. None of us have the same body with which we were born. And if these cells don't die, doctors don't like it. It's dangerous. Or maybe doctors like it because it helps them make some money. I don't know. Depends upon their attitude. But nevertheless, the fact is that death and life are processes of life. They both conspire towards one end. And that end, in a very summary way, Sri Krishna reveals, what is that end? It's a constant unfolding of the self, which is summarized, as it were, in the 18 chapters. Because without that summary, if Krishna goes to action, it would be an incomplete action. He must go through that process. So it's a summary of what we should grow into. And we'll see how that works towards that end. But before one goes towards that vision, in the very beginning we see, in that grim battlefield of life, we have two types of humanity. One represented as Duryodhana. This again comes again and again in the thought of the Gita, the types of humanity, the strata, which someone has very beautifully asked about, the Chaturvarna, which probably will come about. So we have on the one side the boastful Duryodhana. He looks at life. There is a type of humanity which looks at life with these eyes. And he gives a calculation. There is this on our side is this. That is Arakshita by Bhima and mine is Arakshita by Bhishma and Drona. Who dare defeat my army? And he calculates and he, arises. This is a gross kind of indulgence in action. And 99.99999%, probably 100.1%, we indulge into that kind of action. Gross identification with our physical and vital self, with our desired self, with our sensory self, and we look at life with that kind of eye. This is one kind of ignorance. Arjuna is not knowledgeable, he is also in ignorance. Seeing this kind of grossness, Arjuna has another kind of ignorance. A kind of, maybe if one may call, sattvic ignorance, though actually it is a kind of prabhava of Vaishnavi Maya which overcomes his heart with weakness, pity, sentiment. Oh, I'm going to kill these people, they're going to die, I'm going to be the slayer, all these thoughts are coming to me, him. Better I leave all this action and go away. This is another kind of ignorance. Very interesting in Ishupanishad, which is supposed to be one of the origins through which the Gita comes. The great rishis say that those who live in this world of avidya, multiplicity, engaged with multiplicity, all the time they see multiplicity, they contemplate multiplicity, they live as if divided, they go to darkness. Oh, very good. So those who see oneness, what happens to them? It says in the very next verse, those who live only in the oneness, they go as if into a greater darkness. What is to be done? It is very confusing. Thank God there is no Arjuna there. So, the Ishupanishad can just run off to its conclusion. It says, Vidyancha, yast dvedu bhayam saha. It says, through avidya, you pass beyond death, and through vidya, conquer immortality. It's very interesting. Vidyancha vidyancha. This world of multiplicity and this world of oneness. Hold them together. Duryodhana is deluded by multiplicity. His delusion is what all of us suffer from, and unfortunately, there is no psychological help for that. Psychiatrist suffers from it as much as his clients. So, there is no psychological help outwardly, so to say. Arjuna suffers from another delusion, which sort of makes him a candidate for a higher knowledge. His delusion is this world of battle, death, we recoil from it, shrink from it. So there is what is called in spiritual parlance, what develops in him is a shamshan vairagya, a temporary state of disillusionment, disenchantment. Once Nirod Baran, one of the scribes of Aurobindo, he wrote to Aurobindo, I feel a kind of vairagya from this world. Must be going through a blues, people go through blues for various reasons. So I think I have realized what great yogis realize after many janmas. Aurobindo says with his both sense of humor and clarity of seeing human nature. He says, you don't need to go through many janmas and great sadhana to realize vairagya. Anybody with a fit of blues can do it. What you need sadhana is for overcome this maya and vairagya. Sadhana is for that. Vairagya comes to many people when they are going through a difficult phase and wears off as soon as, So when people go through that, best to tell them, as Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, go back and fight the battle. You are just now you are saying all this. The moment you withdraw from the battle, you will be like Achilles. All the time is restless. I want to fight. But outwardly saying, I am not going to fight. Of course, his reasons are very different. Arjuna has another reason. So the very first thing that Sri Krishna does in his, giving you the original yoga, which is uniting these two which are sundered. What is sundered? Yoga means yukta. That liberates us from death. That makes us a candidate for immortality. And then we'll see the function of death. What is yukta? Yukta implies something is divided. Well, we do lead divided existence. We all know that. We think of one thing, we feel another thing, we act in another way. This is one kind of division. Most elementary, we all know it. We talk about Gita and it's very nice, and when it comes to real action, you're all the time thinking, I wish. And I know of Swamiji in Jorhat, Assam, who told one of his hosts, please don't give me more of these clothes and fruits, I have plenty of it. And it's better that instead of all that, you give me that money. Of course, I think he was being honest. But the point is that we live divided and we project one thing, we are something else. This is the most elementary division, which Sri Krishna immediately attacks, which later on he clarifies when he talks about, very beautifully, we had the previous speaker speak about the true renunciation. He talks about tyaga vis-a-vis sannyasa. The true renunciation is an inner renunciation. As long as you can't say that, well, I will not have it, but I will keep having the desire. I can't help it, it's my prakriti. The true renunciation is inner renunciation. So that's the whole emphasis. So we are all divided inside. This is the first level of division. Then we are divided our nature and the self. We are identified with nature, and maybe at some stage we can intellectually conceive of the self. When we read a spiritual book, it looks very nice. So there is something in us which at least survives that. Damn good, this is really good. But that's not enough. That's still a reflection. That takes us to this interesting question of free will. Because Sri Krishna speaks about yantra rudini maya. This is very, it's like you're on a great mounted wheel. So where is the consequence of actions? It's very interesting that there is the deathless self, and on the other hand you are in that sense of the wheel. Your nature is Trigunatmik, Maya is turning you on the wheel. Well, a time comes in this evolutionary journey when there is this free self, the only true freedom which is possible for man is when he discovers and realizes this authentic self in him. Before that, he has a sense of freedom, but there is no real freedom. There is a sense of freedom. But a stage comes when both these sides reflect upon his nature, in his mental ego, and he feels he should act in this way or that way. This is a kind of sattvic buddhi which begins to develop. And Arjuna has reached that point. Duryodhana doesn't question at all himself. He just, well, there they are, and I am into the battlefield and I must conquer them. Arjuna raises this question, and that's his beauty. And there is something else which makes Arjuna qualified for, crossing beyond death and discover the pathways to immortality. Krishna tells him at one of the points actually about the discovery of immortality is that he has the humility which is so much missing to surrender himself to the Lord and say, Shishyasteham sadhimam, I do not know, lead me. If we can do that in all sincerity to the divine, it's very interesting. Gita starts with that, Gita ends with that, almost. But it starts in a very general way. Arjuna's surrender in the beginning is surrender of one who is ignorant, who knows nothing. And he surrenders himself. Teach me, lead me, carry me, guide me. Tell me what to do and what not to do. It ends with an integral surrender. He has discovered a lot and it must culminate in the surrender of all his being, his thought, his action, everything must go to him. But it starts with that central beginning, the surrender. This is the origin, initiation on the battlefield amidst the dance of death, which interestingly is going to bring out something very interesting. Often people ask, what is God doing with this world? There is all around. If you see why, the Second World War, whether we talk of Hiroshima and Nagasaki or we talk about what happened to the Jews, as Swamiji was very beautifully bringing out, what happened to many innocent people on both sides who died. A similar question was raised in a post-Mahabharata conference. All the wise men had a conference, hasty conference. People were called from all over the world, flown in to decide what is the outcome of this war. So everybody is saying, well, this happened, that happened, Yudhishthira gets the Raj, and it is good. All these things they are raising. There are big lectures. So somebody asks, let's ask Sanjay. This fellow had a, inbuilt closed circuit television. Let's ask him. He saw the whole war. We fellows have seen half of it. So Dhritarashtra, the blind king, asks him, oh Sanjay, you have seen the whole thing. You say Krishna is God. What kind of a work is this? Is this God's creation? Is this what he was doing? He has slain people on both sides. And what is the outcome of all this? Except bereavement, wailing, cries, I see nothing else. So Sanjay says, Dhritarashtra, you are blind by birth, that's not your fault, but you are blind not just physically, you are blind psychologically and spiritually. That's your fault. And because of that, you cannot see what I can see. So what is it that you see? Sanjay says, long after this war is forgotten, long after people have forgotten whether Bhima was the greatest warrior or Arjuna, long after, as people were saying, people will doubt whether Krishna was a real figure or a legendary figure. As someone just rightly said, Rama existed or did not exist. People will have debates, and probably some statistician studying in Colombo University will come up with a statistics saying 60% Krishna existed, 40% he did not. Maybe, you never know. The world of science is one of the craziest worlds. Talking about facts, they keep changing every year. Anyways, the point is that he says, long after all this is forgotten, people will wonder whether there was really something like Gandhi which could propel arrows, and out of those arrows, so much of destructive energy could be released on the tip of an arrowhead. After all this is forgotten, people will not know whether there was Hastinapur, Kurukshetra. Two things which are the fallout of this war will always remain. What is the fallout? One, what I have heard just now. Much after humanity has forgotten Bhima and Arjuna and Yudhishthira and Duryodhana, they would remember the Gita and get liberated by it. And the second is that grand vision of the Godhead on the battlefield, just contemplating which every hair of mine is raised on end. This is what will be the fallout. This is God's way of dealing with humanity, with a blind and erring humanity. We have today monks on the street. It's a little digression, but I feel, it touches my heart as much as anyone else's. What is it? It's a cry for democracy and freedom. Much after Burma is there or not there, we don't know what's going to happen after 200 years. The love for freedom and unity would have been preserved thanks to those who stood for that. We must stand for that. It's no more a question of personality. They represent a kind of humanity, stands for freedom and unity. This is how, much after Second World War, we have forgotten now, we have seen this list and some of these films which have come out. What was the fallout of the Second World War? Today we talk about UN and there was a reference to WHO and so many world actions, common action coming together. Yes, humanity moves slowly because that's its path. So this is the second or third or the fourth truth that Gita reveals. This evolutionary journey of yoga is not a sudden journey. That's why sometimes the thought of the Gita appears non-comprehensible because we take out a sloka from here and there. It's an evolutionary journey. And Sri Krishna himself speaks about two kinds of evolutionary journeys. Well, one is, we can use two kinds of schooling that human beings have to undergo. One is the school of ignorance, in which all of us are by birth, our birthright. Ignorance is our birthright. Arrogance is what we earn, but ignorance is our birthright. And in that ignorant school of ignorance, the headmaster is death. And the teachers are suffering, pain, pleasure, etc. Miss pleasure, miss suffering, or Mr. reward, Mr. punishment, etc. Whatever. They are very ignorant teachers. There is a school of ignorance, but they teach something. So, what is their method? Very simple. You think you have learned all your lessons, so a test is given to you, and irrespective of what you write, at the end of it, it says all wrong. So what do? As somebody said, life is a very strange teacher. It gives the test first and the lesson afterwards. So you discover that, no, I have to go on to the next higher level. It doesn't say all wrong, but actually even in real teaching, that's how it carries on. You learn ABCD, we all learn ABCD as, in the kindergarten. In fact, before that, we learn black and white. So when we look at letters, what is it? Somebody asks nursery child, what is it? Oh, black and white. You identify the letters all right. Even if you show him the Gita, he will say, what is it? Black and white. Next level, when he learns ka, kha, ga, gha. So Gita, he will say, oh, I know this. This is ka, this is kha, this is ga. He knows the Gita in his own way. Or for that matter, anything. So at the third level, he knows the sentence formation. So he said, oh, I can read this. I can understand. Nabuddhi Vedam. I can understand this. If he can pronounce well, it's really good. He has really come to next step. So the next step. So again after that, no, this is also not true. So what is the next? Well, it's a high philosophical doctrine, it's metaphysical thought. Krishna doesn't develop it like a metaphysical thought at all. He doesn't talk about logically. He starts logic in the second chapter, and then very soon he goes on to say, well, there is the soul and there is the nature. Arjuna lives in those ages which, where people don't question soul, but scientists have cut the body and they don't find a soul. And thank God he doesn't ask such nutty question. And Krishna would have given a very beautiful answer, I'm sure. And scientists didn't know about the pineal gland. That was another theory that came in between, that pineal gland is the seat of the soul, Agni Chakra. So, Arjuna doesn't ask those questions. He does ask metaphysical questions, but his questions are largely practical. The setting of the Gita is pragmatic. It is not when the two are relaxed and sitting and he says, tell me why has God created this difficult world. He didn't ask those questions. There is no time for that. The very setting of the Gita and the way it develops rapidly with seed ideas is itself an indication this is really right in the middle of the battlefield. At least I have no doubt in my mind that it is really a real situation. Several times he says, wake up, fight, because time is running out. There is every indication that later on there is a second Gita, which some people may be aware that Gita was, when they are in a leisurely state, Arjuna asked Krishna, I have forgotten all those beautiful things you said. Can you repeat again? Now there were no tape recorders that time, and Krishna is not happy at all. He says, you forgot all that? My God himself is giving you. Humanity is going to remember much later and you forgot it? Anyways, now I'll tell you again. So there is another Gita which is called the second Gita. It's much less strong on its impact because it's leisurely, it's a different mood. But here the mood is very different and the setting is very different. So Sri Krishna talks about all this yoga not as logic but as a fact of experience. This is the first thing that we have to be very, very clear about. Yoga is not an intellectual idea. It cannot be spread the way intellectual ideas are spread. Yoga is a living fire. I heard the word live wire some time back. Nanda was mentioning about. Absolutely, it is living fire. When someone asked the mother, I am going to America, how do I spread your yoga? Mother said, you can never spread yoga by any external means. One of his writings should be the rights. Mere spread of the idea is not enough. We want living yogins. It is a fire that burns. And what does it burn? The ego. What is death trying to do? Destroy the ego. Constantly in the school, we spoke about the school of ignorance, we have formed certain identity. I am this, I am that, I am in the Air Force, I am a doctor, I am this, that, I am even a holy man, very dangerous ego to, Arjuna that way is good. That's why perhaps Arjuna is chosen, because Arjuna says, I have full of weaknesses, Lord. I can't help it. I am a weak person, I have pity, I have all the defects in human nature that you can imagine. So Krishna says, you are good. Krishna doesn't go to an ashram and meet some holy man and say, I'll give you the Gita. He says, you people you are not ready even for, you can't even make noise. What will you engage in a mighty action where Kali and Rudra itself are rushing as, So that's the kind of setting and that's the kind of yoga which is being given to him. Not by logical idea, but by a spiritual experience. So we have this first school where we grow from scale to scale, and in this first school there are 3 rungs which Sri Krishna beautifully says: Tamasic, Rajasic and Sattvic. He developed, first he talks about the 2 types of humanity. He doesn't speak, but they are evident in the Gita: Duryodhana and Arjuna. Later on he summarizes this into Devasuri Sampada. It's the beauty of the Gita that first 6 chapters develop the seed ideas. The next 6 develop upon it still further. The last 6 expand it into any amount of details. So there is this concept which is there in the ancient Indian thought and experience, the principle of graduality. In other words, what happens from one birth to another. is not that you become a monkey after being a man. Hopefully not. We don't see monkey population rising, we see human beings increasing. Chances are more likely that monkeys are becoming man, irrespective of everything. Pure statistics. But Krishna doesn't use that language. In fact, the animal population is coming down everywhere. So hopefully we are becoming a little more humanized. I don't know. The point is here that this death and rebirth is not a mechanism of reward and punishment. A good CEO would do that. Even good CEOs don't do that. I think many people are from the corporate sector. Reward and punishment, is it still used as a management method? Maybe, critically, but I think good managers know better. The rewards become more psychological and the punishments are also more intrinsic. So the teaching of the Gita is not as crude as that if you did a nice karma in your previous life, in this life you will be a very rich man, born, amidst plenty. That would mean Duryodhana must have been a very nice person in his previous life. Born a prince, lives a prince, dies a prince. And if he was such a nice person, what came over him? He became such a being. Equally, if that's the logic of justice, God's justice, then Arjuna and his tribe must have been horrible. Poor fellows, they born in the jungles, they come back with so much expectation, again thrown back into jungles, again they survive, again they are divided and given a Khandavprasth, the most terrible place. They make a Singapore out of that. Again they are thrown away, back. And by deceit, imagine, not just by hook and crook. So again, poor fellows, for 14 years, 13 years, quite a bit, whatever, they finally win it. Now something happens inside and they say, we have lost interest in ruling this kingdom. Again they go out meeting sages and saints. Finally, they are born in forest, they died in the jungle. And they say, what a death. Draupadi, literally, there is a very beautiful interaction between Draupadi and the 5 Pandavas in this. He says, don't look back at me. You go ahead. She drops. If anyone else were to die this way physically today, one would say, oh my God, what a terrible death. That's the fate of the Pandavas, with Krishna on their side. Justice, something else, something which we are missing. And that's where the beauty of the Gita comes. Its yoga is psychological. Arjuna stays in the forest, always delighted with Krishna's company. He needs nothing else. And that is why, when the choice is given, choose my army, Chaturangini Sena, and myself, Duryodhana is, oh God, this fellow is really mad. What a thing, it's grace. He must have said, today I believe there is God. He has given me Chaturangini Sena. I am sure God is on my side. If we put ourselves in the position of Duryodhana, that's how we respond. When we get a promotion or a salary hike, oh God's grace, and we offer all kinds of things. And if in modern setting we talk about Gita's relevance, we have to become relevant to Gita. It's not Gita which is to become relevant to us. So imagine a situation if Arjuna, taking Krishna unarmed, came back and he told today in the modern context to his parents, his wife or husband or children, I had a choice to make. The choice was between all this, the world, its army, its power and riches on one side, and Krishna unarmed or another, and I am going in for a battle. So they would ask, what did you choose? You say, I was the first one. Oh, I am sure you must have. And he says, I chose Krishna. Oh, Dad, you just don't know how to make your choices. You should have read a nice book on management and all this. 18 days after, who knows how many lives after, he makes the right choice. And that's where we see this story of evolution in unfoldment. What does Gita speak actually about what happens when you are in that school of ignorance? when you are indulging in tamasic kind of actions. Tamas is gross delusion. What more delusion can there be that I am this body, this bag of bones? Even you don't have to be spiritual. Even I think common sense tells us. Even a simple observation of the facts of the world says us that I am not this bag of bones. A child, as he grows through adulthood and old age, his entire body changes. He doesn't have the same body. But there is something which is the sense of continuity. Again, as the Gita speaks about death in another words, it says, manifest and unmanifest. What is death? The manifest things go back into the unmanifest state. And what is life? The unmanifest comes back to the manifested state. Of course, he speaks about another kind of unmanifest, which we need not go into right now. But essentially, it speaks about, that is something we all understand. After all, what is manifestation? You condense steam, it becomes manifested as ice. You sublimate it, heat it with the heat, and it becomes vapor and it diffuses. So, spirit condenses itself and becomes matter. And the Gita points towards it. It says about Adibhut, Adidev, Adiyagya. I am this entire becoming. I, the deathless self, will become all these becomings, and this my Sharobhava. This entire world of material becoming is none else but myself. What a wide vastness it takes us towards. So this everyone understands. One doesn't have to actually turn to the Gita to understand it. One just has to be a little more pragmatic. Look at life and one sees, physical self keeps changing. But the same is true of our psychological self. As a child, what I learned and thought myself to be, every child, if you ask, who are you? If, I am my papa's son or my mom's, my mom is best, my papa is strongest, and all this goes on. Ask the same child when he's 17 and let somebody introduce, he's so and so's son. He's, not happy at all. He tells, Dad, I think you got to give me space. My child, I'm giving you all the space. No, I need another kind of space. I don't like this every time you introduced as your son. Well, they may not say that, but they feel it. They don't feel happy. They want to have their own self-identity. Which means even our psychological being keeps growing. So even that is not the self. So there is something other than our physical and psychological being towards which Krishna is pointing out. That which is unchanging. The physical changes, the vital changes, the emotions change. Everybody knows the moods. After a nice session on the Gita, it doesn't take much to engage into a terrible fight, all in the name of Gita, but with all the consciousness of Duryodhana. It doesn't take much. So, it's not that self. It speaks about some other self. The unchanging, stable, immutable basis of all things. That which resides in your body as the deathless self. In the story of Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu, we get the same thing. Prahlad representing the deathless self. Nanam Chidam Vishastrani Nanam Dharti Pavaka. It means real life. And Hiranyakashipu, the ego self. I am the Lord, not Hari. The soul says, Hari is the Lord, not me. And a point comes when both are face to face in conflict with each other. There are two ways men have striven for immortality. The Hiranyakashipu way and Prahlad's way. And Hiranyakashipu has his own gospel, which we are still teaching in the schools. That's why scientists are trying to some way preserve life by genetic means, this, that. Hiranyakashipu, he asked God, I want to be immortal. I don't want to die. So God says, that's too much. So he says, okay, that's too much. You think you are very smart? I'll tell you what. So he said, may I not die either during day or during night, inside or outside, with Ashtra or with Shastra, with this or with that. All the possible causes of death, all the possible moments of death, all the possible spaces, he covers up. He says, and God grants him, yes. That is one way to strive for immortality. This is the way divisive mind works, avidya works. You analyze all the causes and say, okay, take this is my checklist. And then what God does? He descends as death and destroys what needs to be destroyed. Death does the same thing. We have all kinds of false identification. We can identify ourselves with tamasic state. So what God does? What death does? God is still hidden behind the mask. He comes and takes away that tamasic state. Sri Krishna says, when you live by tamas, you enter into a more and more delusion. This is the result of tamasic action. This is the result of tamasic shraddha. This is the result of tamasic tapasya. So is it punishing? No, actually it's very interesting. Because that's perhaps the only way. Even modern psychologists say, let him experience what it means. The more there is this cage of delusion, the more the being inside feels like escaping, to break free. That's why you need a kansa for Krishna to come. In that extreme state, and that's why perhaps you need some honorable ministers to say that there is no Rama, for people to wake up and say, what do you mean? Of course there is Rama. So far whether anybody has ever gone to see Rama or not, nobody knows. But then people wake up. So this kind of a constriction releases within us something deeper. When we are in face to face with a crisis, and what can be a greater crisis than death? There is an extreme concentration of consciousness. That's why when people are sick, they remember God. Extreme concentration. Not that God makes us sick to make him remember him. That would be too much of a sadistic God. But this is a fact of life and nature. That's why Sri Krishna says, moment of departure, if you can remember, you will achieve mukti. Now it doesn't mean it's so easy. If you read Yoga Vasisht, all the gory descriptions of what happens during death, one will know it. That's why Sri Krishna, again, we can't take a phrase in isolation. Right after it, he says, therefore remember me at all times. The whole of life is a preparation for that moment of extreme concentration. So it's a state of extreme concentration, anguish, suffering. Immediately, you see, when we are walking on the road and everything is fine, we are self-forgetful and we are forgetful about everything. The moment we are hit by something, the whole consciousness goes to that point. If it is my elbow, I become my elbow. That time I forget all the savories I have had and maybe a movie I am going to see. I am this elbow. It's an extreme moment of extreme concentration. So tamasa action leads to an increase of delusion. That too is grace. Because there is nothing else in this world but the action of grace. Rajas leads to sukha and dukkha. Very nice old scheme of God. Buy one happiness, take two sorrows free. Nowadays we talk about buy one jeans and get two free. God knows about all this, How else will we learn? He is not a sadist. He is not taking pleasure. He is not actually punishing us. He is simply educating us. Babies, grow up. Don't just play with toys and mud. Look up beyond to the stars. What does Sri Krishna tell Arjuna? Know thyself, know God, help men, protect the right. Do thy appointed task in the world. Life and death are nothing, they are mere incidents. You must endure suffering, wounds, pain. They are inevitable in the process of life. Look only above and around you. Above to the shining summits of immortality towards which you go. Around to the clash of forces in this world where light and darkness are so intricately mixed. Actually, if you look at anything in life, it's difficult to say whether it's good or bad. So much good comes out of seeming evil. So much evil comes out of seeming good. And a classic example is we doctors. With all, there must be many doctors, but I can talk about it because being from the same profession, I can take a dig at it. Doctors save human life, but in the process we have lost our natural health. the savage, with all his savagery, was in many ways had natural immunity towards illnesses. Of course, we hear those stories that lifespan was short and all this. We have other stories also that during Mahabharata, people lived for, Gita was given when Sri Krishna was 70, he lived up to 108. Little more realistic. In the previous ages, we have even more. Arjuna himself was around that age. He was wielding a mighty Gandhi and fighting in battle. So, death comes to break these notions, these ideas, even our limited ideas. Not only bodies die, every form perishes. When Sri Krishna used the word form, he is not only talking about the body. Body is only a physical form. Ideas have form. Emotions have form. Desires have forms. Occultists can see it actually. It's a fact of reality. Desires go to realize themselves. Ideas go to realize. We even have nowadays things like, how to achieve success in spiritual ways. All kinds of things have come up. So, it's based on basically occult law. There is nothing spiritual about it. It's simply that all these things have a form and every form tends to realize itself. There is a force inside the form and it tends to realize. So, death comes at some point and intercedes and destroys it. So we go from tamas to rajas, and from rajas we go to sattva. When we do our self-appointed task, even that is ignorance. The sense of even when we do with, I am a doctor, I must see the patients and give ECTs. I used to always have this dilemma inside. Am I doing the right thing or not? Giving electric currents to people who are psychologically disturbed. Everybody has these dilemmas in his own way. Doctors sometimes, people die in their own hands. And these dilemmas are very, very true and real. Abortion, these are real ethical issues concerning death and survival. How do we resolve it in a spiritual light? Sattvic man does duty like that. He does it with the idea that firstly he has a consideration of the right time, place, person. He doesn't start operating on anyone. Come, I am going to operate you and make you all right. So right time, place, person, etc. But what is the result of that sattvic karma? Sri Krishna says, there is an increase in sukham and prakasham. You will have happiness inside and you will have light of consciousness, clarity. So, if all this is already there in the school of ignorance, what is there in the school of knowledge? So there we see in the school of knowledge, the mask of death is shorn and we are face to face with the Divine Beloved. He takes up to teach us. And what is his method? That is the path of yoga. And what is his goal? What happens to the cycle of rebirth when we turn towards the Divine? First assurance is, he says, even a little bit of this practice will liberate you. Second, he says, those who turn to yoga after death come to me, and when they come in their next life, this is assurance from Sri Krishna, the Divine Incarnate, they are born in a family which is already turned towards Divine in one way or the other. Very soon they regain the lost yoga. Imagine, there is no ring of reward and punishment here, but a ring of evolution. And it's very natural. If I turn to God, my next life should be such that I should find God more easily. But if I have turned to God, hiding behind the ambition that I should be a very successful man, then I have not really turned to God. God accepts it, that's different. The Gita says it accepts all the four kinds of bhaktas. But who is closest and dear to Him? The Jnani, who knows Him. And the Jigyasu, who is seeking after Him. So this is the evolutionary journey, first in ignorance and then in knowledge. In knowledge, we have the path of yoga. It's too vast a path. We can quickly just summarize. What does he tell us? The very first thing he tells us is cultivating your equanimity, not indifference, not mere endurance. He talks about endurance. These are ways to go towards equanimity. Indifference to sitoshna, to the touches of the senses, matra sparsh. Endure the joys and sorrows that afflict us. Detach your mind from all these opinions, ideas rushing into our head. And do what? make them one-pointed. If there is one word which Sri Krishna repeatedly comes, whether he touches Sankhya or Bhakti or the Karma, he is speaking of being one-pointed. That is equanimity, being one-pointed upon God. God-centric instead of egocentric outlook, to have a God-centric outlook. That is yoga in one word. Very beautifully, I have 10 minutes or 15? I have, my watch is still tuned.
Well, today is a Saturday, so maybe
5
15
10 minutes. Because 10 minutes. So there is, and then we'll have probably questions. So this equanimity, which is so important, fundamental to yoga, which Sri Krishna speaks about, is the equanimity of the soul, is the equanimity that we discover as we move inside, and the Godhead who is outside on the battlefield of life is revealed as the inner Godhead in man. It's a very beautiful poem where Aurobindo speaks about it. I face earth's happenings with an equal soul. In all are heard thy steps, thy unseen feet, tread destiny's pathways in my front, life's whole, tremendous theorem is thou complete. This is what Gita ends up, almost culminates with. Behind everything, behind gun, behind sensory pulses, sensory touches, everywhere, behind, the essence of it is me. Behind Chaturya, cunning of the cunning, it is me. Behind Bhaya I am there, behind Abhaya I am there. Life's whole tremendous theorem is thou complete.